All right, well, could just be four of us having a little chat today. I was thinking about just reviewing the Exercise in Pain and New Perspective course material for those who took that one-day course and wanted to take advantage of this time together to review that. So I'm happy to do that with you guys if you'd like. We can use it as some stimulus to discuss some issues if you'd like. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good to Mr. Livingston.
Yep, sounds good. I'm in.
All right, here we go then, right? The new one-day course's title is Exercise in Pain, a New Perspective, and trying to introduce people to the philosophy, strategies, and tactics for the way that we assess and improve biomotor control quality from our perspective, the MSS perspective, and, kind of looking at the dilemma, right, of dealing with subjective and objective problems and how hard it is to break free from the local sensation being interpreted as a local problem, and therefore a local intervention or solution is implemented. I mean, do you guys still running into this, right? Where you're talking to clients or other practitioners, or you're watching them and someone's complaining about something in their shoulder or neck, and the focus is on that area, right? It's hard not to. I mean, I can understand it. I mean, how do you guys think about that dogma?
Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time, and also the local time, like the link that they create with the experience and then the pain or sensation they don't like. They don't see or understand the cumulative effects that have led to that. So
Yeah.
I see this thing about, well, this exercise is fine because I don't have any sensations I don't like, even though that exercise or that experience they're having might be compiling and they don't even realize it.
It's tough, right? No doubt about it.
Very challenging.
How are they dealing with it at your new place there, Dom? What are those trainers doing down there?
Sorry, hey, I was doing something. Say that again. What was your question?
How are those trainers down there at your new place dealing with the local sensation must be local problem, therefore treat locally?
They're having a real hard time separating that, which I'm trying to explain to them, but they don't know any better.
Yeah. Stuff, because what do they do now? What's the way they think about it? Are they using foam rolling and electric rubber thumping devices? And
No, they're not that bad, but they're definitely, if someone has, right shoulder pain or hip pain, they're 100% doing something with that joint, regardless of anything that I might say to them or anything, because quite frankly, they just don't have the, their excuse always is, well, you have 20 something years of knowledge and we don't. I'm like, that's fine, but it doesn't mean, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean you have to do it this way.
right.
So it's a hard thing for having people to break, especially when what happens, clients will report a change in sensation. So right away they're like, oh, well, I mean, obviously I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, till it comes back, right?
And then as soon as it doesn't work, then then all of a sudden they're like, oh, Dom, what do we do? I'm like, oh, I don't know. So, yeah.
Come help us. The local sensation, local problem. Hey, Mike, local solution thing didn't work. You're still running into this, Mel, a lot, right?
Yeah, I've actually found that my clients are more receptive to the idea. And they're actually, it's kind of gotten to a point now where they'll even ask me like, oh, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? And I've kind of set it up to where I'm trying to get my clients to think more about their habits and what they're doing, and kind of investigating like, well, does it really help or does it not? It's okay if it doesn't, and kind of just creating that discourse. I do tend to find a lot more resentment or clashing with other instructors or trainers, where, you know, there's kind of this lack of openness and kind of this more oh, we just have different philosophies, kind of protective mechanism of their identities. So it's a challenge to kind of break through that.
Yeah, no doubt. Mr. Robles, right? You're still running into this.
Wait, we still do or we don't?
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. I mean, you know, sometimes it is local, right, or around the region, but so often it's not. And so the hypothesis about biomotor control and changing physical sensations is kind of where we're coming from, in this idea of using exercise to impact sensations like pain, and rethinking the way exercise is used, right? Because of, you know, what Dr. Denubile has essentially stated here, that musculoskeletal ailments have surpassed the common cold as the number one reason for physicians' visits. So that's kind of the framing we're talking about, is kind of these musculoskeletally. And it's always interesting to me to think about how you distinguish between some sensation somebody reports when they point to their elbow or their knee, and how we tease out whether or not we think it's musculoskeletal in origin or not, or something else, right? And you know, the process we have in place for the interviewing and all the other processes, assessments, you know, we're trying to see if it's, you know, more along the lines of a musculoskeletal process than not, but it can be very difficult to distinguish that, you know, and it's easy to blame musculoskeletal stuff on new sensations or sensations that might occur as the result of a surgery or an injury or some compensation, right? I had a client who took some time off and came in. I've been seeing this guy for 15 years, helping him with exercise and managing his knees and his hips and his back, and giving him exercise prescriptions, and you know, he gets it. You know, he's on board. He understands it. Still does some things that, you know, he likes to do, stretching, passive stretching. What are you going to do? And he comes in, his Achilles hurts real bad, and he had taken some time off, jumped on the elliptical, he said, and his Achilles started hurting. So then he starts limping, and as he's limping around, then his non-affected leg starts to hurt in the hip area, and his low back starts bothering him. And so we work through the system, you know, like we do, and that all started to feel better. And then the same side hip started bothering him. And, you know, so he's thinking, you know, he's walking better, the Achilles is feeling better, he's moving around better. So he's thinking that it's some kind of compensatory adjustment. You know, I have no reason to believe anything other than that. He's got history of lumbar problems and disc issues, and he's had both his knee joints replaced, and he was a advanced Taekwondo practitioner for many years, black belt, competed at a high level, extremely beat up from that. So, you know, we're working through it. What I'm doing is not helping at all. And, you know, so I'm starting to question, hey, I don't know if this is musculoskeletal. I don't know what's going on. It, you know, it hurts in very specific positions and under specific load situations. It's kind of a movement position thing associated with it, which usually keeps me, you know, in the game. That maybe this is musculoskeletal. Well, he wakes up one day and he's urinating blood. And so that's quite alarming. and he goes to the doctor, finds out he has a asymmetrical bladder by the CT scan, which means something's growing or something's wrong, because the bladder's supposed to be relatively symmetrical. And so they do some more testing. He has a big old cyst growing on his bladder, and he's chock filled with kidney stones. And when you look at some of the charts on referred pain patterns, which can be difficult to predict, but there is stuff in the literature. Hip pain can be referred from kidney problems and bladder issues. So he's passing the stones. They're trying to figure out what to do about the cyst. It's benign, thank goodness. But the doctor's convinced it's referred pain from the cyst and what's going on with his kidney. So it's tough, right? Trying to solve some of these problems, and we have to be careful about how we deal with some of these issues that just have this onset that can't really be explained very easily. So you guys run into any issues like that where you're just like, man, what we do is not working, right? So we want to, we want to intervene when other traditional approaches aren't working, but often we'll need somebody to help us when what we're doing is not working, if working means, removal of sensation they don't like. So, but how you guys been dealing with some of that, if at all?
I mean, Greg, I can speak on if I find myself in the same area and with similar results, and what we're doing is not holding or it's not showing any progression, and that's usually a really good sign for me to say, all right, there might be something else here, to go investigate and to do something.
Yeah, so clearly that's, I think, an important point, Tim, and what's confusing for me in this case, because his motor control quality was getting better for the things I was working with, which was surprising. But yes, often when we can't keep the quality of motor control, at a higher level than we found it, by the way we define that quality, then yeah, there clearly is something deeper, going on, and a medical referral is necessary. So it's definitely a back and forth. But I am surprised as well as often dealing with motor control qualities, even given a non-motor control source of sensation they don't like, can often help that as well, kind of analgesically.
I've also had someone present with some kind of lower back issues, but didn't really, like, her symptoms didn't really match kind of any sort of, major asymmetries or limitations in motion. She did progress, but she was still kind of like, yeah, I'm still having this discomfort. And she actually, I told her, like, maybe you need to go get checked out. When was the last time? Because it was an older woman. She'd already gone through menopause. And I was like, I think you need to get it checked out. She went and got it checked out, and she found out she had cervical cancer.
Yeah.
And so once that was removed and she was healing and cleared, that pain went away. She's doing pretty well now.
Yeah, good. It's good finding out. It's really it's a tough spot for everybody, right? It's one of the biggest complaints against non-medical people, paramedical people, dealing with individuals that are reporting sensations they don't like and thinking that their interventions are going to work, and keep trying and keep trying and keep trying and keep taking their money and keeping them away from, the medical care or the care that they actually need, getting an accurate diagnosis. So tough spot to be in, right? If exercise, the way we think about it and implement it, isn't helping, they definitely need to be moving on to the medical provider. So, right, because for us, the entire purpose of any assessment we do is to make a positive decision about a physical movement. I would add a physical position. This is Dr. Winter. I don't know if you have his book, Biomechanics of Motor Control. few minutes. Good, excellent book. And the reason we're assessing is to try to make a positive decision about movement or position. And that includes, for us, qualitatively, what the subject or the client's experience is, not just our own. I think that's, clearly still, I don't know if it's unique, but how we go about reconciling those two sets of information, our experience from our assessment perspective, and then adding in or having them start to communicate their experience to try to come up with a positive decision about what's going on. Are you guys finding this easier, more challenging, not much different, when you try to interpret and work through what they're saying and what they're pointing to and how they're describing it, what adjectives and verbs they're using, and your own experience? I mean, how are you guys dealing with some of that? Anybody got anything to share there? And you can see why, a lot of folks just say, I don't even want to know. All I do is I show people the names of exercises as I understand them, and that's all I do. And I don't want to know about all these other things, right?
Greg, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think the important key is that communication with the client and figuring out their language and their own head. That's important, and it's tough because you're building a relationship. You got to figure out. I was just working on my dad for a little bit before getting on here, and giving someone a cue where the cue on the exercise wasn't really what I was trying to get out of him. So I had to change the word, and then all of a sudden the cue went in his head and he did exactly what I was, trying to get out of him. So that communication is really key on what works for them. It's a tough thing because you have to get out of that. You're saying one thing because it's the only way of saying it, and if they can't figure it out, like, oh, that's.
Yep, that's the hermeneutical circle, right? This constant interpretive back and forth to find out how you reconcile what's in your head and kind of what you want to see based on its pre-construction and how they perceive it and how they pre-construct it in their head and how they actually execute it, whether or not they pick up their own error, and their error is based on what they thought they were going to do compared to what they actually did, and the accuracy of the sensory apparatus, the sensorium, and giving them information about what they did. Right? So it's very tricky. What is error in exercise, right?
Right, yeah.
How do you deal with clients that you recommend seeking medical professional and they are like, no, I'm good, that's not possible, for example, that they're trying to reject even a slight opportunity of that being possible?
Yeah, that's not good, right? So that's highly problematic, and I would probably end that relationship. They're not only putting themselves in unnecessary risk, but they're putting us in a bad position. They want to keep showing up and having us work with them when we're thinking or saying, look, I think there's a problem here, and they're blowing it off. That's just as bad, if not worse, than us blowing it off, because we don't want to deal with it. So
Correct.
Yeah, so I would say, look, until you get that situated, there's no reason for us to meet, because I don't want to cause any more problems here.
I see.
And
Right.
They may not like it, but geez, it's pretty wild, because it makes you wonder what they're not telling you, right? Or what they're not telling me.
Exactly, because you're still wondering what is the reason behind them rejecting even an opportunity when they're completely uncertain of the answer.
Yeah, they don't like it. So yeah, so that's good stuff. Our dilemma of addressing these subjective and objective problems and them being local and interpreting as local and local interventions implemented as people point to and describe specific bodily areas where they feel the sensation they don't like, and we surmise there must be something wrong at that specific location. And we can't visually see based on looking at the skin or seeing a obvious laceration, hematoma, swelling, some weird color. And we can't attach it to a specific local event in time. What do we think, and what informs what we think about that? And I think Mel, brought it up in her description of other practitioners saying we just have different philosophies, right? And so, we definitely have a different philosophy if you're leaning or embracing all or part of the body view that I posit in the muscle system specialist course when we take the sample sets that we take and model that sample set to try to get a sense of mechanicalness for the body, as we reference bilateral symmetry as a general reference, and then looking at where they're reporting pain and where they have known disease and known injuries, and reconcile that to the fundamental objective. And so I still haven't really ever seen any practitioner even close to trying to take samples and model their data. I don't know, you guys running into practitioners who take field samples and model their data to come up with a defensible analysis and rationale for why they're doing what they're doing?
No, I have not.
No, it's all mostly based on protocol.
It's protocol, yeah.
I rarely even see anybody taking notes or recording any sort of information after their sessions. It's concerning.
Kind of bizarre, isn't it? Yeah,
Wait,
I wonder
hold on, wait. What do you mean? Like, I'm sorry, I just want to, can you elaborate a little more about that? Like, are you trying to get them to, is this like a first time, seeing somebody? Because I dealt with this frustration before.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen this, Mike. This comes from the full course and how we take postural and circumferential anthropometric and limb trunk range of motion and qualitative manual assessment data to try to paint a picture of the aggregate systems presentation to us, and how that relates to the creation of exercise or avoidance, and leads to decision making. And and I'll often hear what Mel has said before. Well, we have a different philosophy. When I ask them what's your philosophy and process, they can't really describe it. That's what's kind of shocking.
No, they can't.
Yeah,
they can't.
You can't. Not at all.
And the thing that's troubling is they immediately want to know our philosophy.
Right.
But it's mind-boggling because, well, what is it? What do you do? And it's like, what do you know? And I'm not trying to do the whole, stroke nurture reverse, but it's like, I've got to know what you know first to kind of pick through what can make it easier for you to understand.
Well, I think they're also positing a defense mechanism when they ask you what your philosophy is, because they're possibly trying to get quote unquote like appropriate answers, right? Like there's a satisfaction model that takes place sometimes I've found with other instructors or personal trainers or even medical professionals, where if you do say something around what it is that you do, they'll say, oh yeah, that's what I do. Oh yeah,
yes,
yeah, that too.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be really mindful about, how you want to have that type of conversation, because you also have to think about it as a relationship as well. Because if you're the person telling, oh, well, yeah, that's not my philosophy, or you kind of create this animosity experience, that never goes well. I don't
Oh no,
believe it.
It doesn't. No, I agree. It's I share, Greg knows the same. I work with doctors directly, and at a hospital system, and trust me, it's an everyday thing. You're that guy. What is this again? Oh my gosh, geez.
What is this again? What is this? What are you doing? Yeah, I described this to you. Yeah, it's a tough problem to. I mean, in a sense, we're kind of swimming upstream a little bit because it's kind of a unique approach, right? And how we think whether or not exercise should help somebody, how it should be created and progressed. You know, and they got pain in their right low back, and it's got to be the dogma of local sensation, local problem, local solution. So we work on the right low back, and you know, the question and the dilemma, you know, coexist, right? And this idea that's in people's heads that local solutions to local and interventions to locally reported sensations are even possible independent of the rest of the system is you know, really the hard thing to get your head around. I don't know how long it took me to finally start to really understand, well, wait a minute, they're pointing to their right low back and they're using their hand and language to describe it there, but really it's the brain about 2 feet away from that area that's actually, because of the spatiotemporal body map that the actual network connectivity represents, is where that sensation is produced. That's a pretty crazy idea, right? I mean, because, you know, the interactivity, interdependency, interconnectedness makes it an impossibility for someone to say, you know, my hip hurts right here, my low back hurts right here, and this is where everything is happening, right here. And it's like, no, that would be something terrible if that was really the case. Probably would make it even harder to deal with when it's an entire event of the body, really, and the nervous system. So I can understand why it's tough to get your head around or get away from this dogma. Because when we ask the question, why might a local unwanted somatic sensation not be a local problem and not require or respond to a local intervention? And, you know, what informs how we think is this body view concept, and that, you know, each of us has some, whether it's comprehensive or not, or some conception of apprehension of the human body, especially from a specific standpoint or bias. What is your body view? And that, you know, that might even be a better question to ask people, other than what's your philosophy, right? Which is kind of the same thing as, well, what do you think the body is? And I'll ask people that, and they'll say, hey, it's a container. Okay, it's a container. What does it contain? Right? Well, the body's kind of like you know, silly putty and Play-Doh, and it's malleable. You know, the human body it's all fascia. I've gotten that several times. It's all fascia. Everything falls under the category of fascia. So,
Greg, could I ask, sorry to interrupt you, you know, if you do posit this question and people can't really grasp what you're asking, or the question somehow it links to their own identity, and how, you know, if their identity is wrapped up in their role, what are some ways that do you even take the time, or do you just continue the conversation?
well, if yeah, it's an important thing. I mean, some people, they're gonna get cognitively dissonant, right? You know, when you're faced with the reality that you can't really say out loud what you're thinking, because really what you were thinking was pretty shallow and not well defined. Yeah, the identity, the self-esteem takes a hit. It's just like, ooh, I don't want anybody to know my ignorance about this, right? That I really don't know. And then they'll say things like, well, it doesn't really matter, you know. Doesn't matter what you do, that, you know, you just do stuff to the body, and that's okay. I just say, all right, I just Kind of wanted to know what you think the body is and why, what you're doing to it, why you're doing it, right? Hopefully, maybe they'll go away and they'll think and they'll start going, what do I think about that? Many people will not. They'll brush it off and they'll just keep doing what they're doing. So I shake my hand.
That's exactly what those trainers say to me all the time.
Yeah.
No. Why do I care about this? Why do I need to know this? Why do I care what that bone's called? Okay.
Yeah, because they don't understand that the better and deeper your understanding of something, the better and actually easier it is to work with it and solve problems. I mean, we're really relying on the genius of the body and its ability to absorb our mistakes, right, or our bad decisions or our own misunderstandings, and still intrinsically take care of itself in a sense, right? I don't know if that makes any sense. Which is probably why trainers get away with a lot. It's really not them at all. It's the body's intrinsic system-based complexity of taking care of itself, right? That's letting them get away with, letting us get away with stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. When you get to the point where you rest on your laurel and what I know is good enough and I'm not going any further, right? It's probably, unfortunately, more folks like that than not. Why would I need to know this? I guess if you thought of yourself as someone who was, really trying to help somebody achieve an objective and identify all of the problems that could be in the way or need to be dealt with along the pathway and the journey towards their goal, then you would need to know more. But if you really don't think that way, then you just want to give people exercises. Again, exercise is taken on a very narrow perspective from the consumer side as well as the trainer side. It's for weight loss. It's for sports performance. It's for rehab. And its use in rehab is short-lived, and you do the minimum you need to get through, and then hopefully it comes to an end. In sports performance, if you're not an athlete or think of yourself as one and you're just using exercise to get better at something else, okay. And then for weight loss, it's really not that great because you can't do it enough to drive, significant caloric expenditure. And so it's a weird place, the commodification of exercise, which is why we're trying to rethink it as really a problem solving tool, wielded in, the proper hands. It's one thing to paint by numbers. It's another thing to look at a palette of paint and a box full of different brushes and kind of know what each does and how you could creatively, right? Thinking is a creative act, how you could think about using what's available in new dynamic ways based on what you know about paint, brushes in general, and the canvas that you're painting onto. Different surfaces react differently to different brushes and different types of paint. So it's probably what Tom used to call the chef versus cook analogy, right? It's okay.
Greg, I got a question.
Yeah.
I'm constantly dealing with the passive stretching as a way to either warm up or to get ready for an exercise experience. So a lot of times people's minds are blown when I'm telling them to kind of put that aside. I was just wondering how you or anyone else here on this call might deal with that, if you're dealing with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, with my clients, I'll do pre and post motor control quality checks, QM, AMC, MSARS. And they're often stunned at the change, right? Because often you'll see quality drop in some particular configuration. Sometimes it doesn't. Research, I mean, we have research articles in the office, and the research is really moving away from passive stretching. And I just start asking them questions about what is it that they think they're changing when they passively stretch. What do they mean by warm up? So you can ask them questions, but again, you're going to start to realize and they're going to realize how superficial and shallow their own thinking about it is. And they'll usually just default to what? Well, I like it because it feels good to me, right? Okay. What else can you say?
Yeah, or you're seeing it everywhere, from local gyms to, different therapy clinics. I mean, it seems to be everywhere, at least around me.
Yeah, no, I see a lot of passive stretching and a lot of foam rolling and a lot, again, it's the body view. They don't even know they have this body view, that the body's made out of some kind of silly putty-ish, bread dough-ish material. And, when I ask, I just hired somebody, Scott, very educated, very experienced trainer. He was talking to me about NASM's book on, personal training. They have a whole section on flexibility, and again, it's rather shallow. I mean, they talk a little bit about the neurological process, but when you get down to the material science of it, I mean, what is it? When I ask, what do you think you're changing? The molecular bonds between the atoms that constitute the tissues? I mean, the space in between those is getting wider? What do you think's happening? And that's when they freak, right? They're like, dude, I don't know what you're talking. No, and I say, look, the only tissue that we know of that can really change its length based on the way it's grown and structurally and architecturally designed is skeletal muscle. It looks like the rest of it's really not supposed to change its length very easily at all. So we get into the materials conversation.
And then what other materials are you affecting unknowingly?
That's the problem. I said, like you say, you want your ligaments to get longer too, and your tendon to get longer? What do you think you're making longer?
Right.
Right. I don't know. I just like it. Right. But again, every now and then I'll run into someone who they're like, well, hold on, let me think about that. What else would you do? Then I say, well, I just teach the system how to change its length better through the skeletal muscle system.
Yeah, Tim, I think we all run through this. I definitely see it. But like you mentioned before, we're their best option. And if it's a client in front of you, and you're having this discussion, I have discussion every single time. And it's one of those during the consult, if they're coming to you for something different, there's always that, you always have to remind them, at least I do it, and ask them questions about, are you still okay doing a lot of things differently? Because there's probably going to be a lot of things that are going to challenge your viewpoint on things. You gotta make sure reassure them how different everything you're going to do for them, because you are their best option.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that, doing problem solving, I'm always thinking and doing different things based on what I'm learning about them. Educating on that, where, I mean, a lot of these other, if you want to call them therapists or trainers or everything, they do the same things all the time. It doesn't matter what week they're in, what session they're in. It's just becomes very protocol based.
That's what keeps them, but that's what makes you separate and different than them and a better option.
Oh, absolutely. So, but if they're buying into that for years and continue to go back to these other professionals for years doing the same thing, and I'm trying to customize something based on learning and trying to progress, that sometimes comes with conflict, which blows my mind. It always does. But that's why I like talking to you guys about this, because I'm wondering if you're thinking the same way or having these different conversations and, trying to educate. But I'm imagining if I was to pay a practitioner, and go to them for multiple years doing the same thing and getting similar results, and then I'm with somebody different who's trying a different approach and trying to change and move, that I would start to wonder why this person is doing that. It just blows my mind sometimes.
Tim, I have a question for you. Have you considered asking the client, like if you do pose it to them in that way where you're like, so like, are you doing anything differently with, your other therapist? And if they're like, well, no, not really. And you say like, well, are you seeing any differences in your results? And they're like, not really, but I still think it works. And it's like, okay, well, what do you want to do differently this time? Maybe shifting the conversation more to like, how can we help you see the changes that you want to see? Like kind of getting them more into the mindset of, if what you're doing isn't working, right, help them arrive at that scenario as opposed to telling them, because adults don't want to be told things. They kind of need to understand it themselves. And I think if you ask them, you're kind of putting it back on themselves, the onus, right, of what do you want to do differently, that can help them perhaps question, well, yeah, why am I stretching? And why am I doing that? And then you follow up with them the next time and you're like, yeah, like, I know we had this kind of strong conversation about, stretching and what it means for you. Did you get a chance to think about that? Like following up with them and really getting a sense of where they're at, gauging if they're open to that type of conversation. Because if they're not, then you need to really think about whether that's someone you want to be working with, right?
Yeah, I mean, I put it into their treatment plan actually to talk about stretching, and I've shown them different motor control scenarios, and it's like 100%. I mean, it's just amazing after they do the passive stretch, right, to see the change in the control. And I've come about it multiple times, and it's just a constant struggle. I wouldn't say that, I'm changing my approach constantly with different clients and intervening. I was just wondering how you guys might be educating or sharing and having these similar experiences. That's all. But I appreciate your feedback, Mel.
Yeah. It seems like you guys are all doing pretty good with that. Mel, that's really good. Tim, you guys are I think we're all just doing it with the similar struggles. If there's one thing I could really share with you guys, I'm sure you guys are all doing this during the consult. I like to find out what they are committed to. And I ask them if it's okay to stop, like whether it's a habit. I work with a lot of golfers, for instance, and some of these golfers, man, I don't know if you guys know about some of these golfers are just, they're committed to going out there. They don't care how bad their back hurts and all that other crap. But if you ask them, hey, could you kind of put the golf on hold? I don't care. I don't want you touching a club or looking at it for a while. Well, what's a while? They get emotional, right? That really tells whether they're committed to a different approach.
Yeah, it's good, Mike. Yeah, because we asked that question on the health screening exercise questionnaire we pass out for sure. What would you do if you'd have to stop exercising or doing something that you like? So.
Well, then forget it. Then.
It's good. I'm glad you brought it up. Because really, when you think about the first contact, the face-to-face, the homework, right, the screening questionnaire, the report of findings, right, all of those things are trying to build a foundation for the case we're making, that what we're doing is different and the way we're thinking about it's different, so that this person, as they decide to be in a relationship with us, can start to go, wait a minute, what you're doing really is different, right? And I'm into that. Or no, I'm not really into that, and we're trying to get that across along that pathway, so that we can continue the conversation, as Mel's talking about, throughout the relationship, as we get them to consider new ideas and new ways of thinking and using their body. And it's tough to change. Somebody's been doing something for a long time and they trusted it. It's tough to change. I just started a guy You know, he's a year out, had a quadruple bypass surgery. They cracked his sternum wide open. You guys are familiar with this surgery. It's violent. I mean, it's just a violent thing, right? And his hip started hurting after that in his back, and you know, and he's a year into it. Therapists don't know what to do. They just kept doing the same thing, Tim, as you were talking about. The doctor, who's seen, I've showed this particular physician what we do and how we think. I'm not sure it registered. Cortisone shots, just kept telling him it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while, right? Took a hip x-ray. You know, there's diagnosable arthritis here, right? Maybe it's that. And yeah, he came to the conclusion himself a year later. It's like everyone's doing the same thing and no one knows what to do. I need a different approach. And fortunately, he ran into one of my clients who's a nurse practitioner, who I've been working with for 15 plus years, who is often dumbfounded by the results that we get, even as a very intelligent person and well-trained medical person. She has a hard time getting her head around it, and kind of just tells people, look, the way Greg does things and thinks about it, it's not going to be like anything you've run into so far. He'll tell you if it is going to work or not. You're going to know pretty quick. Go talk to him. And, that's fine, I guess. But he did recognize right away that what we were doing and how we were approaching it was totally different than anything he had experienced up to that point, for sure. So yeah, it's just an ongoing dynamic. And I think those are the kind of consumers we're going to be running into for a while. The medical aftermarket, right? Where the traditional medical approaches just didn't work. They're not working. And the good news about that, which I tell my clients, in the consults and the reports, is, I mean, I'm glad that you've been through, a medical process, because if there was something really serious, the probability's high that they would have found it already. And so, this might just be a informational control problem, and I'm going to change your information through exercise stimuluses and in unique ways. And yep, constantly talking that way. It's critical. No doubt about it. But I don't know if we should ever expect the consumer to get their head around it the way we're talking about it. But good. Excellent conversation. Have a body view. These are the two that, I've constructed for myself that I share in the MSS program, and informs how I work and how I think. There's no doubt about it. You guys still lean on this, or have you come up with some of your own versions of body view that are helping you? You guys taking that and running with it? Yeah. Not falling prey to the protocol dogma. A lot of stuff in there. All right. Well, that might be a good place to stop for today. We can pick this conversation up tomorrow, talking again about answering this question, based on body view, why we're saying that, right? Why we're saying, look, your local reported sensation, without a specific event and known causation, could just be about your system's information state, and that we need to create some new information through some new stimulations to see if we can change the information state that might ultimately change your brain's conclusion about what's going on, and that might change the sensation in any number of locations in the body. So good. We'll pick up here tomorrow. And yeah, any final thoughts, comments? Andrew, you jumped in there a little bit later, but anything you're thinking about?
Not at the moment. Is there something specific you want me to think about?
No, just was wondering. Dom, you got any thoughts?
No, this is great. I love the review. I love talking about it. And Tim had some really great points that a lot of us experience, and it's just the ongoing struggle of what everybody else is saying, and then we come in and people are like, what the hell's going on here?
What are you talking about? Yep, this is, it's when you come into systems, established systems with new paradigms and new ways of thinking, expect resistance. It's okay. What we're doing is the truth, and it's going to prevail. So, Eve, any thoughts? Eve, parting shots?
Actually, amazing. I'm really happy that we had a conversation, and especially about that stretching, because I am so fed up with that subject. And I'm sick of all my coworkers always saying, yeah, you should stretch. I'm like, why? So I'm glad that we touched base with that subject. Other than that, valuable information, different is always good. So I'm honestly really happy to be part of that group.
Great. Yeah, I mean, for us, really, a passive stretch is what? An involuntary active plyometric, right? So, yeah. Mel, any parting thought? Good.
I think I'm just enjoying the review. It's always great to hear what everyone else has to say. I think I'm continuously thinking about what the truth means for each client that comes in, and what their relationship to that truth and how trust is established. So kind of going a little bit more on the psychosocial end of it, because it seems to really, or at least I have found that it really seems to influence their sessions and how we move forward.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about that. Michael Rolls, what do you got? Anything?
No, just tagging along with what Mel said. It's really great. It's good that I think for a while, Greg, you and I have talked, and Dom, and even Tim recently. We all have these same struggles, whether it's passive stretching or all these old dogmas. But it's good that even though we're so far away from each other, we can do this and talk, because you guys probably all share the same situation with me. You're the only person where you are, and you feel alone, and there's no one else to share and talk to close by unless getting on one of these or, texting or Facebook messaging. So no, it's great review. So.
All right, great. See you tomorrow. Tim, anything else on your mind?
No, I mean, that was really well said. Thank you again, Greg, for doing this.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll do it more and more, even after, this COVID-19 disaster is over. So I'll set a schedule and just do this regularly. So, all right, you guys have a good rest of the day. And if you want to jump on tomorrow, we'll be doing it tomorrow. See you.
Thank you, Greg. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Greg.
All right, thanks.
See ya.